This is our final panel discussion today, and it's on disinformation and the erosion of democratic institutions. Once again, it's disinformation and the erosion of democratic institutions. And the discussants are composed of Irene J. Liu of Google News Lab, James Gomez of the Asia Center, Gang Badoy of Citizen Safe and Rock Ed Philippines, Gemma Mendoza of Rappler. And our moderator for this session is J. Anthony Cavales of Southwestern University, FINMA. May we ask the panelists to please mount the stage now and take your seats. Once again, that's Irene J. Liu, James Gomez, Gang Badoy, and Gemma Mendoza. And our moderator is J. Anthony Cavales of Southwestern University, FINMA.
Shall we wait po for Miss Gang Badoy to arrive?
No, she's here. She's here.
Sorry, John. Is it John?
Good afternoon, everyone. Panelists, good afternoon. I believe we are actually in our last session this morning, day one of the conference, right? And this session basically is going to bring together the two parts of today's session of the first day. So earlier, we were basically talking about disinformation, fake news. And the other part, we were also talking about democratic institutions, right? The erosion or the decline of these democratic institutions. We are going to bring them in together. We are going to marry both disinformation and the erosion of democratic institutions. So that's basically what we are going to be talking about with these four panelists who are here with us this afternoon. So we have, again, Ms. Gang Badoy of Rock Ed and Citizen Safe. Hello, ma'am. We have Ms. Gemma Mendoza of Rappler. Hello, ma'am. Ms. Irene J. Liu of Google News Lab. Hello. And Mr. James Gomez of the Asian Center. Sir, good afternoon. Once again, my name is J. Anthony Cavales. I flew all the way from Cebu earlier this morning from Southwestern University, FINMA. I'm a part of the Central Visayas Association of Tertiary Press Advocates. It may be the first time that you've heard about CIVATPA, but it's just a 2-year-old association or network of student journalism advocates. And basically, it's composed of moderators, consultants, advisors. Many of us are actually alumni from student publications within Central Visayas, and it's concentrated in Cebu. So right now, we have 12 member schools or universities. So the initial aim is to basically do press competitions, press conferences, summits for student journalists, but we're basically expanding to conduct more, of an active role, especially nowadays that our democracy is being threatened, right? And we have to take an active role down south in the Visayas and Mindanao to actually make sure that we do our part in strengthening our democratic institutions as well. So that's what we basically do in Central Visayas Association of Tertiary Press Advocates. So like what I said earlier, we are gonna marry disinformation, right, and the erosion of democratic institutions. Let me start with the first question, so at least we could get the ball rolling on this discussion. So we've been talking about disinformation and fake news the entire day, and we've been talking about this slow and steady, right, decline, a downward trend of our democratic institutions. Do you believe that there is this such trend, this downward trend, or there's a decline of our democratic institutions in a democracy like the Philippines? And do we attribute this decline so much with disinformation? So you might want to start. Who wants to start?
Hi. So, is there a trend? So, to begin with, the institutions were weak. A lot of our democratic institutions were just in the process of building and strengthening those institutions. There has been some improvements over the years, but they're obviously not as strong as the institutions in the West. What happened, what has been happening the past couple of years that we were seeing was that disinformation. So to begin with, people don't understand what are the roles of these different institutions. The CHR, for instance, what is the role of the Commission on, of the Commission on Human Rights? Is it to police? Well, what we are seeing on social media is that people are asking CHR what exactly they're doing when there are crimes. That's not their role. So it's what else? The press. So to begin with, news literacy is not yet that robust in the Philippines. And then what has been happening the past couple of years is that there has been a lot of, there's been relentless focus on what you might say. To begin with, there's weaknesses in the press as well, diba? It's not a perfect institution. There's corruption as well. It's been uncovered by the press itself, like corruption within the ranks. But that kind of thing, what has been done was that all of these weaknesses are being highlighted and twisted to make it appear that these institutions are not useful for democracies. Even democracy itself is not exactly, not exactly an ideal system. All of these things are being said in social media through this content. This is disinformative content, and that has an impact. Like on the press, for instance, we have seen the studies show that there's a marked difference between how people exposed to social media regard the press as compared with those that are not. So yes, there is an impact, and it's happening.
Thank you po. Miss Irene J. Liu, we're actually interested to know because Miss Irene here is from Google News Lab. So we're basically interested to know what Google News Lab does and how it's actually related to disinformation and what we're talking about this afternoon. So what do you guys do in Google News Lab? And you might want to discuss it now.
Sure, great. My husband asked me this question still. He was always like, what exactly does Google News Lab do? So just to give you all a sense of kind of what we do, I was a reporter for 10 years. I worked for the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong, and I was at Reuters. And then 2 years ago, I joined Google to lead the Google News Lab in Asia Pacific. And our broad mission is to essentially work with journalists and bridge technology and the act of journalism. So reporting and storytelling. And I will say that in the 2 years that I've worked at Google, in terms of my role, it covers everything, right? It can cover everything from augmented reality and virtual reality and data journalism to issues of misinformation and disinformation. And I would say that of that menu of options, I would say 90% of what I do is focused on working with journalists to fight misinformation. The reason is, I think, there are many reasons. One is that, and the most important one is that this is what journalists are thinking about. This is what they're focused on. This year we've had many elections, and we have many elections to come in the region. And so, essentially, of course, journalists never really think ahead until the deadline is met. But actually, because of the conversations that we had, everyone knew that these elections were coming. So in the kind of months and years ahead, everyone's thinking, okay, well, what do we do? How do we tackle this together? And so, functionally, in terms of the work that I do, I've been really focused on working with fact checkers, verification experts, both around the world as well as in region, in various countries, to think about what kind of training is helpful, what are the best practices for using tools, what are the best tools that can be used for fighting misinformation, and also being the ambassador of journalists and what you all are seeing on the ground within the company. So that as a technology company like Google, which has multiple platforms, search, YouTube, and many others, as they grapple with the technology side of the question of mis and disinformation, what are people seeing on the ground locally? How is it different in the Philippines versus Singapore versus India or Indonesia? And making sure that within the company, those examples, that insight on the local ground is heard. Because I think that one thing that I've seen just in my experience with this work is that there are several global trends, right? The advent of the internet, it is a very noisy place. The information ecosystem is very noisy. As a result, people don't know where to turn to for high quality information. And I think that there is an erosion of trust in those traditional gatekeepers, right? So before the internet, you went to your newspaper, your TV station for news, you went to your church for spiritual guidance, or whatever religious institution, your synagogue, your mosque, you went to your schools and your universities for education, right? And you went to your government for public services and governance, right? And I think that now people are just, they sort of in this very noisy environment, they're just trying to figure out, where do you turn? Because there are so many options for how you get information. And I think that the role of the journalist has evolved now. It's more important than ever because people are actually looking for where to reach information. And I think that's the reason why Google has the News Lab, why we have this initiative called the Google News Initiative, because we know that the role of journalists is really important to make sure that there is high quality information, because it's there are standards in journalism, editorial standards and practices. And so, part of this is how do we make sure that the technology understands journalism, journalism understands the technology.
We are going to get back to you later, Ms. Irene, because I'd like to believe the audience as well, but even I myself, I'm very curious about how Google can actually play a vital role in curbing, disinformation. And we're going to get back to you later with more questions. Sir James at the Asian Center, how do you think does disinformation impact this erosion of our democratic institutions?
Yeah, I think that's one thing about disinformation and also laws that silence you, such as the fake news laws, those that are online and those are coming on board. I think there are 4 areas where I think the democratic institutions in the region are impacted. First of all is freedom of expression, right? The silencing of critiques. I think one of the phenomena you will see throughout Southeast Asia is the silencing of critics. And usually there are 3 categories. First are the academics. academics can be called out for putting out false news or inaccurate reports. So that's one impact there under the umbrella of freedom of expression. The other one would be CSO or NGO activists. They are also called out, especially when they put out reports, pointing to crimes against humanities or human rights violation. The state contests those information and then criminalizes those who put out such reports. And the thirdly is electoral candidates. Electoral candidates across the regions are also under attack, especially when they speak up during rally or they put up information over different social media platforms. So that's one cluster of impact on democratic, well, say either institutions or practices. So there's freedom of expressions. The next one is the attacks on diversity. Again, broadly, and these are not comprehensive lists, one on religious diversity. You see a lot of it around Indonesia and Myanmar, where social media is put out, and depending on how your law is framed, people use that legal framework to ask the state to punish the other side. So you have that one phenomena there, religious diversity. You also have things related to ethnicity or indigenous community. You see a lot of that in Vietnam and also Laos, especially among the Montegads and the Hmong community, and throw in a slice of religion there, and you get, intolerance. And then also against LGBTI communities, there's a lot of that there, also online, and most recently we've seen that phenomena pick up in Brunei. We've talked a lot, I think, today about media, and then, we are in the Philippines, we had a lot of case studies on the Philippines, but also to remind us ourselves that Cambodia also, Hun Sen came up with an announcement they're going to have such laws and use that as a pretext, not only to close a few of the media houses, but also put people on notice in the run-up to the elections they had in July last year. The last but not least is the elections or the electoral ecosystem. You'll find, especially in Thailand, since we've just come out of the elections, you will see that the Computer Crime Act, fake news, even less majesty, is being used to nullify candidates who have won their seats, and sometimes they go one step further to actually dissolve the political party. So fake news laws also are giving rise to fake elections in the regions. So these are, I think, are the four things that I want to put out as impacting democratic institutions and also practices.
Thank you, Bob. Ms. Gang, Badoy?
I'll jump off, of course, from where Ms. Gemma, Irene, and James, James so organizedly presented four things that he thinks contribute to the breakdown of institutions. I have one that's very anchored on culture and ugali ng Filipino. We're so we're deeply intertwined personally with other people. We have aunts and godparents and neighbors and next door neighbors. I grew up with him. He's almost like my uncle, and I have, etc. That's really how we are. Mga Pilipino, ganyan eh. And I think that contributes to the decline of institutions. If I'm sick and I need, let's say, well, I'm sick, but let's pretend I need dialysis, I will not go to the institution. I won't go to the Department of Health, even if it's next door to me or whatever, PhilHealth, etc. I will find someone who knows someone. I will find an uncle who knows someone inside the institution, because that almost guarantees I will be served. My health will be served. So in the Philippines, grabe yung disparity in terms of services, because it depends on who you know, who you're related to, who you're related to knows, and etc. And it works in a reverse way too. For example, I have relatives who are in government, and I regularly criticize whatever I see, but when it's my relative, I keep quiet. Not because I'm afraid or because I love them, or of course not. It's not that. It's because I know in the Philippines, by default, culturally, your voice does not count. Because it will only become family versus family. It will only become a teleserye dramatic thing. Like we have half-brothers who are running for Senate, JV, Ejercito, and Jinggoy. Whatever they say about each other, negate. For me, in my head, I immediately zero. It doesn't count. Kasi they don't like each other. I don't think they like each other. I'm not sure. It seems like they don't like each other. So I'm put in a position as well. I have a half-sister in a high position in government. She's a USEC. That if we weren't related, and I see things I think I would normally and habitually criticize, especially with manners and with proprio, even the issues on sovereignty, I can't point it out. I can't, and I don't. Even if it's professional, I don't. It's not because I'm sparing her, because she's my half-sister. It's only because I know in the Philippines, culturally, that's not my card. By default, my opinion doesn't count. Does that make sense? So this relational thing, this very close tribal association, it's so demonstrated in our language. It really is. When, for example, is your name John? Jay. If I say, oh, that's my husband's name. Cool. If I say, I love Jay, that's me, verb Jay. But in Tagalog, in Filipino, it's mahal kita. The two pronouns are already stuck together. We, Jay and I, will go. In Filipino, pupunta kami. It's already one word. So even in our language, you can see we're always kind of stuck with each other. So now, why am I bringing this up? Because I think it's not hopeless. I think if the law and the implementation of the law and processes, and with the help of technology, information, speed, system, efficiency, I think it can transcend these connections. We know this. Because everything's electronic now in the passport system, I can't call an uncle inside anymore. I need to line up because the system, because technology said there's no space for a fixer. Everything's so it's not hopeless. I bring up our cultural. It's one of the beautiful things about us, actually, and it's also one of the most debilitating things about us. Case in point, Yael Buencamino's resignation, the Arete executive director, who, on a normal, regular motion, invited her aunt, Irene Marcos, to an opening, and, well, the ending of the story is she had to resign and etc. because there was a martial law statement of the institution, which is the university itself or the Jesuit order itself. And for me, I'm thinking, that's her aunt. That's her aunt. Maybe it's supposed to be separate. Where's the battle? Is there a boxing ring? Is there an octagon where we can just, when we're in there, we fight? Or is the fight for democracy everywhere outside all the time? So I don't know. I have questions. So one thing for me that erodes institutions faster than anything, especially now in the digital age, everything is faster, times 10, is the ties. Family ties, friends ties, etc., that go above the law, go above process, the ties that are prioritized over a system. Does that make sense? I think system will save us. So we've been, like Gemma said, we're a young nation. We're really just slowly building our institutions. The United States has had their Constitution 1776. When was ours? We're so young. That's why it's okay to take into consideration the cultural ties, familial ties, etc. Because if we make those proceed, then the institution will really be in danger. It really is. I've seen it. We've seen it. We know this. Do we take advantage of it? Yes. And who does? Those who are connected. So I'm guilty of it. I know this. Because many voters will say, I don't really like this, but I know him. I can call him. I don't he's all right, but he's not. So what does that say? What does it say? Number one for the Filipino citizen is access. Access to the person who decides. So how does this translate to disinformation? With Twitter and Facebook and etc., the normal Filipino citizen thinks they have a direct line to the senator because senator replies on Twitter. So there is an illusion. My God, that's another layer of deception and problem and disinformation just because nag-reply yung senator. We think we have access, but no. So I will only emphasize, sorry, that exhausted me. I will only emphasize is that constantly build the institution. Vote for people who protect institutions. Choose people who decide, that build institutions. Because if the institutions are in place, familial ties will be left where they should be, you know, in the dining table, at dinner, Christmas, etc. So that's the one major factor I'm adding to his list, and to Google's list, and to Rappler's list in French. Because it's the ties, it's ugali natin eh. So maybe we have to restudy and rethink many things about us.
Right. We have to do that this coming May 13, midterm elections, right? That's where we ought to actually make or take action, right? This coming elections. I hope this does not exhaust you even further, Ms. Gang, but I have a question that I want to ask you. And I think the audience as well is, curious, but you mentioned it earlier. It's no secret that your half-sister actually serves as an undersecretary of the Duterte government. And this is something that's close to me, at least personally, and I think to some people here, or to many people here. We've got friends, we've got families, right? Who are not, or who don't share the same political principles like we do, political beliefs that we do. Even close friends, right now we're severing ties with them because they don't share the same principles like we do. I grew up in a family who's right now strongly supports, like I don't to say 110%, the government, and that's that's not me. So what do you suggest, right? How do we go about it? How do we deal with families, connections, social ties, friends, close friends who don't share the same political principles like we do? You might want to share some tips.
There will definitely be 100,000 answers to that question, right? Because for every individual, there's really you're like a chemical element. I'm one element, and let's say my half-sister's an element. Neither one is good or bad, but sometimes when you combine two elements, they just explode and set the place on fire. And so maybe it's best to keep two elements away. Sometimes it's like that. There's no good or bad element, but there are combinations that are bad. So bad for everybody around. There are several basic chemistry teaches us, sodium and chloride. When they're combined, it's just table salt, But then the exact thing, if you combine with another element, can be explosive or damaging or etc. So like I mentioned earlier, it's our relations that. So what advice can I give to those with people who, loved ones with differences in politics? Well, the answer is completely yours, but I think the individual, me, sorry, I can only speak for myself, will need to know even before engaging exactly where your values are. Because I think country is not separate from the individual. I think the nation is not separate from me. So do I love them? Yes, of course. That's family, etc., etc. Can I stand them for dinner? Not always. No, no, actually. But you are there. I think it's not only with family. It really applies to a nation. The revolution is wide. We will really have different opinions. But there are truths that you cannot move. Like, I do not like it when someone's murdered and it's not investigated. I do not like it when there's extrajudicial killing that's so obvious and they cover for it. That doesn't matter anymore. Look, something like that. Between my, say half-sister and I, or my cousin and I, or who doesn't, a DDS best friend and I, there's no arguing the fact. There are deaths that are uninvestigated. There are deaths that are rather obvious, but we turn the other way. There are deaths that are caused by the police. And you don't argue with that. It doesn't matter what side you're on. So how is your priority peace? Maybe if it's life and death and nation, maybe the priority is not us, hugging at the end of the day. I mean, our priority is, this is how you fight. You believe that your government is good. This is how I fight. I don't think so. And there are certain truths that I think will correct us both. If I'm wrong and you're wrong. So my advice is always go back to what is fact. Always go back to what is truth. Always go back to what is in the Constitution, what is rule of law, what is etc. It's not as simple. I get it. But if we can strip off all emotion and then discuss the fact at hand only if we can. But if we cannot, then like good elements, know which element is not good for you and stay away from that element. I mean, stay away from combustible elements.
Thank you po. Salamat po. I want to go back to what Ms. Gemma said earlier. Ms. Gemma mentioned about Commission on Human Rights and how do we actually educate Filipinos, how do we educate the citizens, the people, on the roles of our democratic institutions. Is there something, should there be, other forms or platforms that we need to do other than really educating them? Because it doesn't seem to really work. Because right now we still see on Facebook like people, and these are not dummy accounts. These are real people who say CHR pasok every time someone dies, and it's on the hands of the criminals. So it's still ongoing. How do we go about this? Going beyond education, is there something that needs to be done more than that, or?
I think it's a combination. You have education, which is the long view, diba? Like at the end of the day, kasi these are not gut issues as far as people are concerned. I will not be fed by democracy. I mean, it fosters development, but it's not like it's not something that I can directly trace to something I eat. Does that make sense? So it's it takes a lot of it takes a lot of education to then appreciate the role of, like, for instance, justice, the justice system. So the Commission on Human Rights. So, and that has been a steady. Even the police. What is the role of the police, diba? As compared with, the police are obviously not. They're part of the justice system, but they're not the ones who who actually judges who is guilty or not. They're supposed to be executing after, right? Or keeping peace. So it's all of these things are still being. There has been some improvements over the years. In fact, some of our coverages in the past have been on programs that were being institutionalized in these different departments to sort of help in educating one internally, the system itself, those within the systems, like what exactly are their roles versus what are their perceived, what do they think they're supposed to be doing. And then within the public itself. So what I was saying is that unfortunately, while you're still a young democracy, we're really very young. We're half a century old, and part of that century, part of that half a century, we were in a dictatorship. So it was not really. It was a disrupted democratization process. And then while that was happening, this happens, so basically, it means rebuilding again. It's rebuilding trust. It's not just about education, but it's also about the institutions again, rebuilding trust within the public, like showing the public how relevant, why they are relevant, which is really a lot of work that needs to be done.
Ma'am, I have a follow-up question to that, po. Yes, you're about to say something, Ms. Irene.
I was going to say, to piggyback off of what Gemma said, it's so interesting the way you framed it in terms of, these concepts, these high-minded concepts of democracy and free speech and civic values. They don't fill your stomach, right? But at the same time, good marketing makes people think that they need things they don't necessarily need, right? And I think that, to me, one of the things that's been so interesting is that traditionally, journalism, education, universities, schools, there was this sort of sense, well, everyone knows that these are valued. Everyone knows that, because before the internet, the only way you got information was from media, right? And so these institutions didn't have to do any marketing to assert why there's inherent value. And I think that this is the reason why I think about this a lot, is because obviously it's a question for news organizations. How do you survive in this era now when anyone can go anywhere for information, or they can go for words or images? Whether they're true or not is a different question, right? But you know, people have lots of choice. How do you make them go to what you're offering, right? And so I think that this is something that I think increasingly news organizations have to really be able to articulate, which is why what they produce has value, why it's useful for somebody. This is something that Google thinks about all the time. I mean, literally Google's mission is to make the world's information universally accessible and useful, right? So constantly thinking about like what's that value proposition and how does the user like view or take what we're offering, right? And so I think that this is it's you know, education is one way to put it. The more commercial or capitalistic way to put it is marketing. But either way, I think, you know, how do you make it interesting?
Jumping off of Irene's bringing up the concept of marketing, sa akin, is it okay if I speak in Filipino? Sa akin, yung pagsalin, super importante. In English, we translate. We need to translate. We know within our country, there's probably 6, 7, or 8 sub-nations when it comes to language, vocabulary capacity, socioeconomic comfort or ease level. We're not just one country, so we need to translate. I always imagine myself as a translator of sorts. I always translate as best I can difficult concepts of politics to the high school or to the college student. And it's the same, we need to translate. That's marketing, I suppose. And like, for example, I needed, and I think I tried to grab it, I tried to grab the opportunity as best I could. When we had a water shortage a month and a half ago or a month ago, I grabbed that week by constantly saying, it doesn't matter if you like Duterte, Sara or not, or you like Chel Jokno or not, nakaligo ka ba? Were you able to shower this morning? No, which means it doesn't matter who we vote for. If some of us have water and some don't, it's irrelevant. And you know, water is human rights. Water, we think that's the kind of translation we need. The analogies we needed, the translation of the abstract, because the abstraction that is human rights is actually food, is actually water, running water, is actually a job. It's actually a clinic I can go to if I'm sick, even if I don't have money tonight. I think it's that. I think we need to find a way to connect these, that they're not separate things. These words are actually services that are not being given us. Words like corruption, stealing from PDAF, words like pork barrel, words like illegal contributions, blah, blah, blah. These words, they actually translate to 5 to 10 kids that are not vaccinated, that are not fed. You know, words that say tax exemptions, sal-ins that are fake, hidden wealth in Panama Papers, etc. They're not separate from a kid who can't go to school. They're actually so connected. So it's the responsibility of people like us, I think, to translate these. Like Google, I think that's your responsibility too. And Rafa, of course. We need to talk to each other. Not, echo chambers exist, and I love them every now and then. I need that every now and then. But kailangan may nagtatranslate. Kasi iba-iba tayo ng language, iba-iba tayo ng, it's an earthquake. It's all right, relax. We're cool.
We're good.
That,
It's
it's
really
okay.
big.
Try to go under your chair.
Yes po. I'll cover.
That's fine. Go under your chair. Or go to somewhere solid. No worries, no worries. It's best
strong.
yata to go by the wall. If you can, work towards the wall because that's where the strongest beam is. Yeah.
So just don't go into the light.
Para if something falls, there's that wall. Okay.
Don't stand under this thing.
Yeah. Everybody come down. We're good.
It's okay. We're cool. That's the steadiest
Still
place.
shaking. We're good.
Where you are is the steadiest place, so we're cool. Yeah. Don't stay under something that's shaking. I'm not.
Yeah.
It's
So that
okay.
one is shaking.
Well, someone shut me up. I felt like God shut me up. It's okay. No. I will. Evacuate, no, not yet. Not yet. Stay lang where you are. Super expert ako sa earthquake. No, this is just an after effect of the shake.
This. Yeah, horizontal, I think. It was horizontal.